there. Um, I am a filmmaker. I'm making the Food Lies film, which will go into great depth, debunking all the myths put forth by the plant-based films and the plant-based movement. I've been working on it for 3.5 years. I've been studying nutrition for 7 years, and I had my own health journey. I actually lost both my parents to chronic disease, and I got serious about my health about 7 years ago, and have dedicated my life to it ever since. And just about 2 years ago, I've just found so much value in red meat and beef that I started a company. So that's when I finally got into, giving people access to beef. I also made a little YouTube film debunking the Game Changers film, which many people have heard of, with all the plant-based athletes. So I debunked that. It was actually the same length as their film. So here are some of the world's biggest problems. It's not all of them, but I think there's some of the biggest ones, right? There's human health decline. We have heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes. I mean, these are the big three in all Western countries and moving to other countries as well. We have malnutrition, if we're talking about the entire world. I actually just visited Africa for the film to see some of the native living peoples, look at the difference in diet and their health and how it's changed and how it could be very good or it could be very bad depending on how that's changed. Another big problem, healthcare costs. I'll get into more of that later. Environment, right? That's a big one. A lot of people are talking about global warming, about methane emissions, about the soil destruction and unsustainable water use. So this is very important to our future of feeding us. And then there's the ethical aspect. I mean, there's a lot of vegan people with, very good points about, not harming animals or treating them poorly. And luckily, I know a lot of great ranchers around the world that do very much care for their animals. So we'll get into that. So again, here's the great scam. So somehow cattle has been blamed for all of these problems I've listed.
Welcome, everyone. This is All Minus One, and I am Bill. So, the video you just watched, the portion of that we'll get back to, but that is from Brian Sanders, who has a channel on YouTube called Food Lies that gets into the investigation of all of these things that we are told constantly that are, the complete opposite of what we should be doing for our health. So, and these are the issues we're going to talk about today. So very specifically, we're going to look at the anthropology, the archaeology, or we'll discuss that, and the just general debate over what we used to eat. Now, as a clarification, because we came from something and we did it, doesn't mean that there cannot be new food substances introduced in, right? That's silly to just sit there and say, well, new foods can't be eaten because we didn't evolve to eat them, if you're coming from an evolutionary perspective. That's silly because that wouldn't work. We obviously had to begin to eat new foods at some point or another. So our bodies are highly adaptable, but this is more about what is it that made us human beings, that made us strong, that we continued in life and until essentially we created societies and agriculture began to degrade our beings again. That's kind of sort of what happened from what we can tell anthropologically and archaeologically. So before I get into all of that, welcome all. I see you here, Auntie, and Val said that she had a meeting. See Sam Nope is here. I want to remind everyone, I see Sam over on the Entropy. If you wish to make donations, that's the place to go. Go to the Entropy. You can pay donations to there. Or if you wish, you can send a direct donation to me through PayPal. There is a subscribe star. If you support, you like my work, you want to help out me and my family, that's how you do it. Sam says, in the Entropy, having healthcare costs listed as one of the world's biggest problems in a time when healthcare is more readily available than ever seems like a utopian perspective to me. Yeah, but we're not doing healthcare because we have all this language that doesn't reflect reality. What we are doing is sick care. None of these people that get this care are healthy. They wouldn't need the care if they were healthy. We are giving out sick care in pharmacare. We give drugs to people. I talked about this, I believe, last week a little bit, where we give folks statins that has a 300 to 1 incident of help, meaning that it takes 300 incidents for one person to actually be helped by the drug. However, of that amount, there are about 15 people who are hurt by it. Everything else is kind of innocuous, although I wouldn't say that about statins from my understanding of them. They're just not good for your health in general. So we don't practice healthcare here. I'm not a fan of the idea of universal basic healthcare per se, right? But I do understand having a system potentially like the Swiss have, where there is a fundamental level of checkup care, and then after that, you pay for everything. For me, I would prefer to do that on a community or state level. But of course, you can't keep commies from having their fingers in everything. They love to get their fingers on stuff. So, let's see. Looks like I have 4 viewers over on D Live. So welcome, guys. I appreciate that. It's a little bit better than normal. Dalhuck, you're late and gay. Yeah, I was a little bit late myself because I actually was out grocery shopping before I started. I've had this stuff ready for the last week or so, though, and hopefully over the next couple of weeks, you'll see at least some information that's compelling to you, and you'll see that we are just way off course in our perceptions of diet. And you'll have vegans argue silly, ridiculous things based on pseudoscience that is presented as science. You'll see that there is a huge political bias and infiltration of the vegan woke scolds, if you would, because that's basically what they are. They've been around forever. But the vegans have been pushing these ideas. They actually control most of the money and the flow of money through dietary research. Of course, again, most of the research in diet is absolute utter nonsense and pseudoscience. It's very much the same in exercise science. Their methods just are not good, and there are a ton of biases. Now, in exercise science, there's no real politicking in it. When it comes to this, it is 100%. And we'll have a whole episode over the course of an hour or two, however long it takes me, I'll show how the United States government got more and more involved. And as that occurred, well, our society got more and more sick. And don't get me wrong, folks, part of this is an issue as well with our just luxurious lifestyles. The fact that we just have a lot of wealth, and that gives us more options. We're far more sedentary, although hunter-gatherer societies, believe it or not, quite sedentary. They actually weren't super active, and they weren't super active primarily because, well, they didn't have a lot to do except for go out on a hunt every couple of days or once a week or whatever. And often when they would hunt animals, here in the Americas, there are stories of Native Americans who would track down and outrun deer. Literally, they would do a zigzag pattern, and they would run the deer to exhaustion or into a pit or something like that. Did often the same with buffaloes before the horse was introduced. But if not that, they would just walk for very, very long periods and track the animal until they could find it. And this is just how life was for all non-agrarian societies. So I'm going to go back to that video here in a bit, but I want to read to you some science. So let's see how well this works for me here. All right. So, folks, this is from Science Direct. This is from an article from the Journal of Archaeological Science from 2007, Nitrogen Isotopes and the Tropic Level of Humans in Archaeology. What is nitrogen isotopes? Well, that is the isotopes left in your skeletal system, and that they can detect the amount of meat that you are eating, because meat is highly enriched with nitrogen. So we're going to look at a few papers like this just real quick. Human and domesticated animal bone collagen values in prehistoric differ generally by 3% or more from Neolithic to post-Roman times in northwestern Europe, leading to an assumed dietary animal protein fraction of 60 to 80% using a standard interpretation of well, I don't know what that symbol is. That's a Greek symbol, obviously, to the power of 15, and that is the nitrogen value, from what I understand. We examine the assumptions on which this model rests and the limitations of our knowledge in the analysis. In archaeology, we have developed a set of models which, with small changes made in assumption in order of 1%, can produce substantially lower estimates of the dietary animal protein fraction for giving values. We consider the implications of various dietary animal protein fractions on agriculture carrying capacities and human population densities in prehistory. So to view the full text is probably not going to be available, or at least not while I'm in dark mode. Yeah, it's not going to be available to me, but I think you could probably get the gist of this. They're saying that human diets had a lot of nitrogen in it, and they consumed a lot of animal products. Now, these values are not completely known. They are guesstimates. That 60 to 80% is, generally speaking, the amount of animal products, whether they be bovine, grazing animals, whether they be like wild game, whether they be from the ocean. That's what they're looking at here. So some of these do have are a little bit contrary, but again, this is going way back. This is from 2007. Not way back, but you know what I mean. This is from 1997. And we already sort of knew this and understood these basic things. Abstract and figures. Hold on, guys. Stable isotope analysis of human remains is a research tool that can provide paleo diet information for archaeological sites, such as caves, where traditional evidence may be missing or out of context. Unlike other lines of evidence, the stable isotopes of carbon and nitrogen in human bone reflects the chemistry of the diet and therefore provide a direct measure of foods consumed. As an example, the data from isotopic analysis of bone from the Merce site, a cave in Lee County, Virginia, are presented. Although the site lacks phenol or floral remains, that is flora and fauna, right, to provide basic information about the availability and potential utilization of food resources, the stable isotope data from other sites throughout Virginia and North Carolina provide a basis for comparison. And again, that gets into technical jargon. If you guys want to look up, read these full texts, they are here. I don't feel like I have the time to do all that. And there's, again, going to be a lot of jargon in there. So it depends. It depends on what you find. Obviously, studies are not always available for the general public unless there's an easy paywall sometimes, or a good site would be PLOS One, because I believe most of the articles on there are free, perhaps not all of them. So half-life date based on past amounts of atmosphere C14 levels versus carbon-12, which is common carbon. Well, there you go, anti-commie. Isotopes are elements that have different atomic weight. A carbon dating uses radioactive carbon-14 isotopes. Right. There are issues with carbon dating in various ways, but generally speaking, this is how we have this information. But I'm going to present to you other information about primitive cultures that we have observed in the modern era. Before I do that, let's go through chat real quick. Midsun Man, I'm a new chat. Midsun Man 09. Well, cool. Thanks for showing up, buddy. Haven't seen the username, so we appreciate it. Yeah, anti-communist wasn't saying that was good, mind you. Yeah. I mean, again, there are issues with the testing because there's an assumed value that we're starting off with, which we technically don't know. But there's a lot of assumptions. This whole thing that we have in science, this is why I will phrase evolutionary perspective the way I do, because I believe in certain tenets of evolution and others just there's no evidence of. We literally have presuppositions that if you go back to, they just don't exist. Someone said them, and that's what everyone agreed upon. Diet is very much like that. So, and scientists don't tend to like to divulge that they're wrong about things. Some do, but a lot of them do not. So here we have from 2021, a global carbon and nitrogen isotope perspective on modern and ancient human diets. The carbon and nitrogen isotope composition of human tissues can be used to infer dietary information. Let's bigly this some more. Give it one more. There we go. Look at that. Got it full screened. Now, if I can read it full screen. We transform isotope compositions of 13,666 modern man and ancient analysis to make them comparable to a common scale. This reveals that the isotope dietary breadth of modern humans is highly compressed when compared to populations predating the development of 1910 of modern industrial fertilizer by the Bosch method. However, modern humans that still use traditional subsistence strategies retain remarkably similar isotope dietary breadth to all pre-Bosch human populations. Increased reliance on industrial agriculture and pastoralism is resulting in a cascade of rewiring to remaining food webs globally that can reduce the resilience of global ecosystems in the face of accelerating environmental change. So again, right here, you can see in this that there is a bias because they're talking about climate change. I have a bias against climate change because I don't think, again, that the science lines up. I don't feel like I know that 90% of it is pseudoscience. It is. You get into it, you start understanding how carbon works, you start understanding the greenhouse effect is not how the earth works. You begin to understand the long history of the earth that we perceive and the changing of the weather. And sure, carbon probably has had some effect. I don't think that all the people that are pushing this, who are multimillionaires buying up land on coastlines, believe in a word that they're saying. They just want to tax you. So in any case, let's go over here real quick and watch a video. So this is something that you should all need very, very much to understand. From Paleo FX, see right here is the site. This is Dr. Terry Wall's Maximizing Nutrient Density for Optimal Health. Hopefully y'all will be able to hear this just fine. I'm going to play this for you. And I want you to think about this. I'm going to explain it a little bit. It's nothing technical or difficult, but I want you to think about this and what you eat today and why people are basically undernourished.
And this is some interesting work from Dr. Boyd, and he examined a Stone Age diet based on 3,000 calories, 35% from animal products, 65% from plant products, and compared that to the average U.S. diet as defined by the Food and Nutrition Board in 1989. And you have a ratio paleo to US diet. Now, the paleo's favored a little bit because it's 3,000 calories versus 2,000 calories. But still, you see a higher proportion of nutrient density for the mineral intake as compared to the US diet, with the exception of sodium. And of course, we add lots and lots of refined sodium to our foods.
So, first off, she's coming to this based on the belief that Stone Age people had a 3,000 calorie a day diet. Probably not. And that they ate 35% from animals. Probably a lot more. And 65% from plant subsistence. The data doesn't show that. I just showed you some papers on that already. But again, I'm not going to hold your hand on this. I expect you to go do the research on your own. I am pointing you in directions. But the more important thing is that she's comparing modern kind of paleo diets to what these people potentially ate, what she believes these people potentially ate. And there's still deficiencies. Well, the reason why is about to be explained, and it's pretty simple. We do agriculture like idiots. So, oh, howdy there, Josh. Josh says, let me pull this up so everyone can see. Howdy, sweet cheeks. I'm glad you appreciate my cheeks.
When we look at that from the vitamin intake, again, there is a much more nutrient density, higher vitamin intake, ranging from 2 to 6.5 times. So the micronutrients in general, when you're looking at a traditional hunter-gatherer diet, and whether it was the copied Stone Age diet from Boyd's work or the more recent analyses of modern hunter-gatherers who are still eating their traditional foodstuffs, wild foodstuffs, they exceed the RDA's 2 to 10-fold. So it's clearly much more nutrient dense than the standard American diet. The Calkins did some very interesting work looking at the nutrient density of standard diets, the American Heart, the ADA diet, the My Healthy Plate diet, South Beach diet, Atkins diet, Practical Paleo, Primal Blueprint diets, to see just how nutrient dense were these foods. Now, the US average diet, you'd have to consume 27,000 calories to hit all of the RDAs for the vitamins and minerals that have established RDAs. In the paleo diets, though they were vastly more nutrient dense than the American Heart, ADA, or My Healthy Plate, they still didn't consistently meet all of the RDAs. They missed about 40%. And so you would have to consume 14,000 calories. They were the most nutrient-dense diet that they analyzed, so that's great news. But they're still not hitting all the nutrition that we think we need.
So let's stop there for a second. The data, as far as diets that they analyzed, as far as modern human diets, a paleo-style diet was the most nutritious. Now, what does paleo mean? It means all kinds of things to all kinds of people because it is a guru-style sort of thing. I suggest if you're into the idea of paleo, go look at Mark Sisson. He's got a blog, Mark's Daily Apple. He's got a book called The Primal Blueprint. It's pretty good basic stuff. It's pretty good basic information. Mark's not going to scare you away from carbs, from tubers. That would be like root vegetables like potatoes and sweet potatoes, stuff like that. He's not going to gaslight you about these things. Human beings consume starch throughout all of what we know of history. They have. What I would say, though, is it's been a smaller percentage or part of their diet. It's a subsistence, it's not to be used as pure subsistence. It is supplemental to your subsistence. Your subsistence should be primarily animal products, unless you can't do that for some reason. And again, we'll talk about traditional primitive diets. I'm going to call them that because these people were primitive people. They didn't have advanced societies and agriculture like other societies did. Have they tried homestead food and made in style of yore? Have they tasted the Amish or Mennonite diet that comes from their backyards? Well, that's kind of what this gets into a little bit. And yeah, well, that's another thing is we don't eat seasonally anymore, and we always would have had to have done that. So again, though, when we start going through this, what you'll find is that folks tended to have prioritized meat and fat. They might have ate some like wild yams and berries and some other like leafy greens, and that was about it. The majority of what they ate was from animals, from fatty animal meat, and from organ meats, because they have the most nutrition. They have the most vitamins and minerals.
So why is that? Well, this is from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Naked Calories also use this in their book, which, by the way, I recommend. It's a terrific book. They looked at the mineral content in an apple as reported by the USDA in 1914, 1963, 1992. There was a 48...
So I can let her speak whatever the chart's up here. Calcium, phosphorus, iron, potassium, magnesium all dropped significantly. Magnesium, 82% since 1914 to 1992. Of course, 1992 was 30 years ago. So how much more has it dropped? And folks, this is because we don't rotate our crops anymore. And she's going to talk about this. We use glyphosate, that is Roundup, on our crops. It destroys so many good bacteria. And, as a pesticide, bugs get resistant to it. Eating a particular way in certain parts of the world that aren't doing agriculture stupidly is going to be far more nutritious. And I've heard accounts of this. I've heard accounts of going to, say, somewhere like Costa Rica and getting an avocado there's been testing done on these, like an avocado from there, and then say maybe one from California, right? And it's highly more nutrient dense. This we will get into in a week or two. We'll talk about calories in, calories out, nutrient density, all that good stuff. But the big point is that you can have a lot of calories, empty nutrients, but not be getting the basic essentials that your body needs because of the poor state of our agriculture.
8% decrease in calcium, 86% decrease in phosphorus, 96% decrease in iron. The potassium held fairly well, only a 2% loss, and an 82% decrease in magnesium. And of course, that was over 10 years ago. How much further has it decreased? Now, this is a similar analysis over a shorter time period in meat. 4 ounces of chicken, and that was chicken breast, and 4 ounces of ground hamburger. Conventionally grown, I'm sure. So for the chicken, there's a 20% decline in calcium, 36% in iron, 4% in potassium, 100% loss of vitamin A, 50% loss of thiamine or B1. For the beef, 17% of calcium, 21% loss of iron, 17% loss of potassium, and 30% loss of thiamine or B1. So in general, I think you can say that the food you and I are eating is less nutrient dense than the food our parents ate growing up, and our grandparents ate growing up, and our great-grandparents ate.
Yes, but not only that, not only is our food that is good food less nutrient dense, but we are eating far more processed food with far more polyunsaturated fats, things like corn oil, which we don't eat a ton of. A lot of studies in the past that studied a high-fat diet would feed people corn oil as the fat. That is insane. This is not like human beings never ate corn oil highly in their diet. It's a highly processed oil. Corn does not produce oil easily. Same with canola. Stay away from that stuff, folks. Don't eat it. Don't have it in your diet. It's highly inflammatory. Highly. You want to have problems with your LDL and HDL, which, by the way, aren't bad things in either case. They're just lipoprotein carriers that are doing their job based on your stupid behavior. Maybe your behavior isn't bad, but that will be a problem for you. The doctors will tell you that because they take plaque to and carry it away from sites that have atherosclerosis, that is damaging of the cellular wall of the arteries. Right. And as that happens, they're putting cholesterol down to repair it, because that's what cholesterol is used for, and point it away. And as you continue to cause that inflammation, it can't keep up and it just builds a hard plaque. And that's when everything clogs up and you have a heart attack, or it breaks loose and you have an embolism or something like that. So, just not fun times.
Growing up, that depending on the nutrient, you've lost 20 to 100% of the vitamins and minerals. Again, why is that? Now, again, using USDA analyses, there's been an 85% decline in the mineral content of North American soil. Comparable decline in Australian and European soil as well. Why is our soil mineral content declining? It used to be, now I grew up on a farm in Northeast Iowa. So when I was a kid, we rotated the crops every year. That was a way to control weeds and pests. There's no more soil rotation. We rely exclusively on chemical fertilizers and herbicides. And by the way, the pesticides are getting resistant. And so now there's a conversation, what do we do about that? There may be some hope for going back to rotations. Glyphosate, which is the ingredient in Roundup, chelates minerals, and it's also a very potent antibiotic. It is killing the soil microbes, and it is making the minerals less available to plants, which is why, unless you have a Roundup Ready gene, the plants die. And the payment for the crops is based on weight. It's not.
That was a good comment there, Josh. Facebook believes that canning is a sign of white supremacy. No doubt, because you're being independent and self-sufficient. Anything, if you guys hadn't figured this out, anything that keeps you off the government dole makes you a white supremacist. So this isn't today's show isn't going to be that politicized, but it's just the reality of it. Let me check chat real quick, and before I play the end of this, elsewhere, that is. All right.
Not based on the amount of vitamins or minerals in that food crop. And the only taste that humans at birth will automatically prefer is sweet. So we have a consumer interest in sweeter taste, in more carbohydrates in the food. So the agricultural food has been shifted to more carbohydrates, more weights. You get more. So when I was growing up, you'd get 60 bushels per acre in corn. That would be a good yield. 80 bushels would be a phenomenal yield. And now it's more than 200 bushels per acre. So you get more weight, you get more starch, but you're not getting more vitamins and minerals.
And that's the bottom line. That is most of our modern food. And again, it's because we don't take care of proper crop rotation. The other thing is we have misplaced our belief in believing that plants make up the majority of our diet, even though we're not ruminating animals. We don't have the kind of jaws that are supposed to eat plants for a long period of time. Our stomach's empty within 3 hours, unlike ruminating animals, which their stomach's never empty. We have a short intestine. Again, we don't have multiple stomachs. We do have a cecum, but barely. And the bottom line is we just cannot take a lot of plant matter and turn it into nutrients, or we can take nutrients from it, but turn it to energy for us, unless it's straight starchy plant matter. It's just not efficient. So again, we look at these hunter-gatherer type. Let's go to just one more. Plus one is what I was talking about earlier. Very, very good for getting information, guys. If you want to read whole articles and you don't want to be worried about paywalls and all that. So this is from 2018. Coastal complexity. Ancient human diets infer from Bayesian stable isotope mixing models and a primate analog. So an extensive ecological literature applies stable isotope mixing models to derive qualitative dietary reconstructions from isotope ratios of consumer tissues. While this approach works well for some organisms, it is challenging for consumers with complex, varied diets, including humans. Indeed, many archaeologists have avoided the use of mixing models because uncertainties in model outputs are sufficiently large that the findings are not helpful in understanding ancient lifeways. I would disagree. This is a myopic viewpoint. It's easy to understand that almost all cultures, well, not almost, all cultures around the world prioritized animal foods as much as possible. If they weren't available to them, then they ate more plant foods. And what you'll find is if they didn't have like grazing, ruminating animals around, then what they tended to do was eat more seafood or bugs. They ate a lot of bugs, folks. We have a long history of eating bugs. So, and that's all you're eating when you eat, crab and lobster and shrimp and all that. They're just big sea bugs. They have a lot more meat because of the surface area and the heat in the water and the ability to get more oxygen into their system, which is why we don't have giant insects like in the prehistoric past. The air density is much different today. So it says, indeed, many archaeologists have avoided the use of mixing models because, let me get this bigly. Let's see, where was that at? Uncertainties of models' outputs are sufficiently large that the findings are not helpful in understanding ancient lifeways. Here, we exploit an unparalleled opportunity to evaluate the feasibility of dietary qualifications and a nutritionally and isotopically complex content on the Cape Peninsula in South Africa. And then the delta values, yada, 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 of 213 indigenous food samples enabled us to characterize 4 food groups: terrestrial plants, terrestrial vertebrates, marine invertebrates, and marine vertebrates. A recent study of baboons that consume marine and terrestrial foods provides insight into the relationship between such foods and consumer tissue isotopes. We use this information to refine our interpretation, yada, yada, yada. In bone collagen from 35 archaeological hunter-gatherers, achieve better estimates of the relative importance of marine and terrestrial foods in the diet than has heretofore been possible. Based on Bayesian stable isotope mix model, this is one of the models they use to try and figure out the percentages and numbers and all that stuff of how many animals were they eating in general, or how much were animal foods in their diet. And these coastal humans is closer to +3 than +5. And in most yada, 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 nitrogen-rich individuals, 65 to 98% of bone collagen, 95% credible intervals, derived from marine foods, meaning these folks ate a lot of animals from the sea. Conversely, in the nitrogen-poor individuals, 7 to 44% of bone collagen derived from marine animals. The uncertainties discussed here highlight the need for caution when implementing, the SIMNs. That's how they figure all this out. Again, though, I'm not going to hash through all this. I just want to show you guys that the papers are out there. If you start looking at, nitrogen isotopes and human tropic level, you can type this paper in directly. You will find all kinds of stuff. You'll go through them. You'll see where, some scientists contradict each other. And I have one more after this, guys, and we're going to move on from this. Again, though, if I got data, I want to show you there's a good bit of it. And this is a fraction of the amount that's out there. Stable isotopes reveal patterns of diet and mobility in the last Neanderthals and first modern humans in Europe. Now, of course, this current theories go, Neanderthals and humans were parallel species that intermixed. So correlating cultural, technology, or technological and ecological aspects of both upper uh, Pleistocene, Pleistocene. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. See, when you know a word already, but you don't know how it's spelled, you can figure it out, right? Pleistocene modern humans and Neanderthals provide a useful approach for achieving robust predictions about what makes us human. Here, we present ecological information for a period of special relevance in human evolution, a time of replacement of Neanderthals by modern humans during the late Pleistocene of Europe, or in Europe, using the stable isotropic approach. Here we go. We shed light on aspects of diet and mobility of the late Neanderthals and the UPMHs. This is just humans. I don't know why they use this acronym. From the cave sites of the Torsim Cavern and Goyet and Spy in Belgium. Probably not pronouncing those correct because they're French names. We demonstrate that their diet was essentially similar, relying on the same terrestrial herbivores, whereas mobility strategies indicated considerable differences between Neanderthal groups as well as in comparison of the humans. Excuse me. These humans are somewhat different groups. Now, I did read this paper the other week, and essentially what it finds out is that they, if you want to go through it, that most of these groups, except for a few, so this is in a picture, obviously, give you some idea of where they're looking. So, Brussels. Down here are the sites that they are looking at. Here's Cologne. Way up here is Rotterdam and Amsterdam of, the Netherlands. And this paper basically goes through and finds, again, that they ate a lot of meat. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but this is a pretty full paper. We'll go down here to results. For all considerations, or for all considered samples, the collagen preservation fulfilled the conditions for reliable biogenetic stable carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur isotropic values. Carbon and nitrogen stable isotropic values for the study, we analyzed the collagen from the 2 UPMHs and the 18 Neanderthal specimens, including 6 new samples, as well as 1 Neanderthal individual from Spy, yada, 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 values of 19% for the individual represented, da, 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 da. It goes through here from the study, shows the different values, meaning, they had slightly varying diets. The study presents 1 Neanderthal immature individual in addition to the already published specimens representing the adults, and so forth. And again, it goes down through here. So you have to get through all the science jargon. But here we actually have numbers from animals. So from the sites of Lomersum in Germany, we analyzed the carbon and nitrogen ratios of collagen for horse, reindeer, mammoth, wolf, cave lion. Here, the values obtained range from 20 for horse, 20%, to 18% for reindeer. Horse was a very valuable meat for a long, long time, and the Mongolians still use it for such. It's a big staple of their diet. And then, what is this? The N values range from 2% for the reindeer, yada, 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 cave lion. So these things were in their diet, right? Bottom line. And then the sulfur isotopes give them, what kind of plant vegetation they were eating. And again, you can look at them in much, much smaller percentages. We can see just in general. So there's that, folks. Not trying to bore you to death with, technicalities, but just showing you this is where we come from. Exceptionally high in values in collagen single amino acid confirm Neanderthals as high tropic level carnivores. Significance: identifying past hominin diets is a key to understanding adaptation and biological evolution. Bone collagen isotope studies have added much to the discussion of Neanderthal subsistence strategies, providing direct measure of diet. Neanderthals consistently show very elevated nitrogen isotope values. These values have been seen as a signature of, excuse me, of top level carnivore diets. But this interpretation was recently challenged by a number of additional theories. Here we apply compound scientific isotope analysis of carbon and nitrogen and bone collagen single amino acids of 2 Neanderthals. These Neanderthals had the highest nitrogen isotope ratios of bulk collagen measured so far, and our study confirms that these values can be most parsimoniously explained by a carnivorous diet. And if human beings and Neanderthals were separate species, we'll just go with that assumption, and they integrated, they were going to be eating very similar diets. Plain and simple, folks. Plain and simple. All right. So let's hold on here.
So
let's get
many
back to
big
this little
problems in the
video.
world, and somehow we're blaming.
And let me check chat real quick. Appreciate y'all for being here. As always, please like, share, subscribe. You know, the thing. It does help. I am one sub away from the big 250. So if you guys want to, you know, make my channel just a little bit bigger, then you should sub. Again, if we look at these isotopic values, though, all over the world, it ends up being the same. Alabaster said, "I'm driving. I want to let you know, Sci-Hub is another great free site for studies." Okay, cool. Thank you, Alabaster. Appreciate that. And I said something last week, but thanks again for being on the show last week, and thank you for the big donation over on PayPal. I appreciate that so much. You know, I just had a baby. She's going to be 10 weeks, guys, for those of you who don't know. So obviously, budgeting, things change. Obviously, prices are going up. So if you guys can help me and my family out, greatly appreciate it. If not, just please give the show a like, you know, try and share stuff out and help me grow. That's just as important. Yeah. Josh Ham says, there's a reason most communities started next to water. Diving and fishing are low-calorie food, relative methods, and humans need to drink water. Yeah. So there you go. In any case, let's play this video. I'll get some other things to pull up for you. And hopefully we have another good solid hour to go. You know, if I finish early, I finish early, but we will likely go on for another hour.
This poor cow. You know, it's going to be crazy. I'm going to try not to get mad. But once you start understanding this information, when you go beyond the headlines, you should get mad because it makes no sense. It's insane. So part of the problem and why we need to know why beef is not bad for us and the environment is we need to know the real enemy, right? If we can't be fighting the wrong enemy, what good is that going to do, right? We need to know the true enemy. This is not, you know, the exact Sun Tzu quote, but we do need to know our enemy so that we can fight it. And I'll be throwing a lot of information out there, so I put it all on nosetail.org/beef, and all the studies will be there. So we'll start with beef and human health. So I believe red meat is a superfood. So this flies in the face of everything that the mainstream media is telling me. And we're going to jump in here. So it's a great new study by a friend of mine in Israel, Vicky Bendor, that just came out very recently, within the last month. And he looked about 25 lines of evidence from about 400 scientific papers and found that for about 2 million years, humans were basically carnivorous. And we relied on fatty meat. He wrote a paper a few years ago called Man the Fat Hunter, and we were always building technologies, and part of our whole life was acquiring meat. And yes, of course, we had plant foods for many other reasons, and it's fine. But this great paper showing how much we relied on meat. This is a great one with looking at the stable isotope data. So this is the nitrogen isotope we can see through the remains. And this is the Upper Pleistocene modern human diet. There's also some Neanderthals, which was in a cave up in France, I think, modern day France. And we were at the top of the food chain. It found with this hard evidence that we were, based on the stable isotope, nitrogen isotopes in our bones, that we were highly carnivorous. So these are some of the animals we were eating. They had a lot of megafauna back then. And there's even some bigger animals before they were wiped out many 100,000 years ago. So moving on to our bodies, I'm just going to lay the foundation of why meat is so important, if that's not obvious. So I'm starting way back at the beginning. So our bodies change. A lot of vegans will try to compare us to our ancestors, these primates, chimpanzees. Well, that was 7 million years ago, and a lot's changed since then. And so it doesn't matter that we don't have fangs. We haven't needed fangs in about 3.5 million years when we started creating our own tools. And my great friend, Dr. Bill Schindler, studies all this, great paleoanthropologist, and he would knock 2 rocks together and create a blade. And this is when we did not need fangs or claws, because we started processing food outside our body and acquiring food with tools. And that's what makes humans so amazing. So as we started getting more nutrient-dense foods, our small intestines grew. It grew longer, while our colon, our large intestine, got smaller. And the small intestine is where we digest these highly nutrient-dense, bioavailable food, animal foods, beef, ruminant meat. And the colon is where you would digest plant food and would ferment. So you can see all the primate relatives have the large colon, the large intestine, and we have a small one. So a lot of research has been done to show that as our brains grew, we did this at the expense of our guts. And this was because we had access to great nutrient-dense food like animal foods. We also have other evidence that our stomach acid changed. I mean, it's very metabolically taxing to have a high pH stomach, right? A very acidic stomach. And we have one of the most acidic stomachs. So this is no accident. So a lot of scientists agree this is from our millions of years of scavenging meat. We would show up to the carcass and it would be rotting, and other predators already got there. And we would come in with our, maybe throwing rocks at them and sticks and trying to chase them away and get the leftover meat. And so our stomach acid was able to digest that. So our stomach acid is similar to a hyena, which is a scavenger, and vultures, which are scavengers. So most people know meat was crucial in development as humans, yet today we're somehow told it's bad. So it's funny because some of the stuff, I mean, this is just basic science, but people have this cognitive dissonance where they're like, yeah, we ate meat forever, but now we don't need it so much, right? So, well, let's look at some more modern hunter-gatherers. So we have, this is from the Ethnographic Atlas. They studied, I don't remember how many, 100-something native living groups, and 73% of them got over 50% of their diet from animal foods.
So, folks, this goes on for a bit, and I'm going to let it play some more. I'm just trying to get a few other things up because I got a lot of stuff to pull up. But go to Food Lies if you want to watch this whole thing. I did cut this to about a less than 20-minute video. There is a lot of information there. This is a whole hour-long presentation. And I would say Brian's channel is good information in general. And I will give you lots of resources as we go through all this, because I'm always about making sure that people have places to go, can read second opinions, third opinions, fourth, fifth. Not everyone has it perfectly right. I don't think. You have to do what is best for you, of course. And plain and simple. So, sorry if I'm being less talkative right now, but I'm about to bring up a bunch of stuff, and just wanted you all to understand that this has a bit to go, but this information he is presenting is quite important.
And of course, there are no plant-based societies. That's a 0 in the bottom left. Now, here we have another study on stunting. So this is about malnutrition. And there's a lot going on in this graph, but on the right, we have the developed states. There's Australia second and the United States first in the highest amount of, well, lack of stunting, lack of this malnutrition, preventing children from growing. And in the most, we have Sudan, India, Bangladesh, Ethiopia. So these are the places where they eat the least meat. So I drew in that red line, that trend line, but you can see all the black dots are the risk of stunting. So you can see there's a clear trend that as you eat less meat, you have more stunting. So here's another great study talking about this, that they've identified 6 micronutrients that were particularly low in these vegetarian diets in certain countries, Egypt, Kenya, Mexico: vitamin A, B12, riboflavin, calcium, iron, zinc, and very, very drastic health consequences: anemia, poor growth, rickets, impaired cognitive performance, blindness, neuromuscular deficits, and eventually death. And animal source foods are particularly rich sources of all 6 of these. So that should tell you something. Here's a fun one. Hong Kong diet is 46% meat, dairy, and eggs. It's one of the highest in the world, if not the highest. And
that's an important one too, because if you all recall, at one point or another, there was a China study, which is one of the most erroneous studies ever written. There is no correlation or causation found within that China study, and it underestimates the amount of animal products that the Chinese eat, because that's almost all that they eat. The idea that they eat a lot of rice and vegetables, that's American Chinese food, folks. They eat a lot of fat, a lot of pork. They eat a lot of animal products. They eat all kinds of crazy things, at least, from our perspective. The bottom line is, though, it is not a low protein or low fat diet. And of course, Hong Kong, being quite wealthy, can afford to eat a lot of meat. They're one of the healthiest populations in the world.
they also have the longest life expectancy in the world, and it's been increasing in the last 46 years as they've been eating more meat. So again, just a correlation, but it's a fun one. Here's another one in Asia: the risk of mortality for total meat intake and provided evidence of an inverse association with red meat, poultry, and seafood. So that means the more of those animal foods they ate, the less likely they were to die or the longer they lived. Now, it's important to note that all protein is not created equal. When you do nitrogen analysis, the plant food nitrogen is not actually usable protein to our bodies. So you have to take into account the digestibility. And when you do these equations, beans, which are supposedly a good source of protein, are actually about 1/3 as bioavailable and usable protein when it's all said and done. So this is important to know because people are saying, hey, we have all these great plant foods now. We can eat rice and beans, and those amino acids are all we need. Well, that's not true. So you'd have to eat a lot more of them, and then guess what? You're going to eat a lot more calories, and most people in the Western world don't need a lot more calories. So here's a quick one on just comparing some of these most popular plant foods against food like sardines. I could use beef liver, and it would have been off the charts. And
so we'll come back to this, but sardines, you can see this off the charts for retinol, B3, B12, very important, by the way, folks, for your nervous system, B12 particularly, and your myelin sheaths. That is the sheath that covers your nerves. A lot of the problems that we have today, again, in modern society and nutrition is probably, well, I'll put it this way. The guy to check out for this, and a highly respected doctor, is Dr. Bruce Ames. Now, I mentioned him the other week. I'm not going to play a video from him, but I will bring this up. This is from Montana State University. Bruce Ames, vitamins and mineral inadequacy accelerates age-associated disease. Bruce came up with what's called the triage theory of nutrition. Right here, Found My Fitness. This is Dr. Rhonda Patrick's site, and Bruce is her mentor. And he's highly, highly respected. And I mean that because he's like a legitimate scientist. He studies chemicals. He knows chemistry. Another guy that I was just listening to his lectures for is Matt Lalonde here on Jason Strobe. But you can find him over here on Ancestry Foundation. I'll probably play some Matt stuff in the future, but he went through and looked at this as a biochemist, because that's what he is. And he's a PhD in organic chemistry at Harvard. And the one thing he didn't do was look at bioavailability, but he did measure food based on their nutritional densities. Guess what comes in first place, folks? Every single time. It's animal products. Second is spices, and it goes down the line to like, it's kind of a mix between tubers and leafy vegetables. And of course, way down the line is things like grains and legumes, which will pretty much poison you and you'll slowly die from. So I'll put it that way. You might tolerate it well, but there's a reason why you have gastrointestinal issues after you eat a lot of beans, and it's not just the fiber. There are a lot of anti-nutrients in lots of foods. We will talk about that in the future. But just to show you, Matt has all kinds of stuff out there. And again, this isn't his field. So he's approaching it as a hobby. He just wants to know what the information is. And again, Bruce Ames is very important. So
they would have destroyed all these plant foods, but
yeah, you can eat a ton of these other plant foods. You're not going to get the kind of levels that you're going to get from sardines. Now that calcium level is really high because when you eat sardines, you're eating the bones. But that's good for you. Same with like if you get canned salmon, you will eat the bones. It will be in there. In any case, let's see. Let's play another few minutes till he gets to another section, and then we'll get into looking at ancestral diets.
I said, hey, let's use sardines. Just all these great fat-soluble vitamins, way more than any of these foods. This surprised me. I thought, oh man, carrots, peas, fruit. It's like, that's so healthy. Oh my gosh, it's so healthy. And then you look at it, and this is just USDA data. This is just plain data. Anyone can look up. It's not there. The actual nutrients aren't there. So moving on to cancer, people say.
All right. So as far as the nutrients needed, your body needs certain ones. Like I said, the B vitamins for the myelin sheaths in your nervous system. It's very important. Cholesterol is very important too, folks. Dietary cholesterol is less important, but the amount your body's producing is important. Now, what happens when we lack these nutrients? Well, your body has to triage things. And it means that some things go to the wayside and don't get the proper nutrients that it needs. So your body can't make the enzymes that it needs to break things down, or whatever it may be, the hormones, whatever chemical reactions that the body needs. And that's how your body works, on chemical and mechanical reactions. But that is that's not going to be fully possible. So things start to break down and you get free radicals. Now, most people will talk about, from a vegetarian vegan standpoint, how many antioxidants you get from all of these fruits and vegetables. It's nonsense. Your body doesn't use them. Your body has one primary antioxidant source. It's called glutathione. It makes it itself. You can supplement glutathione, although there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that it works to supplement it. But glutathione is your body's master antioxidant. So all your vitamin E's and all that other stuff, might help to some degree. You need some of that stuff, but it's not doing what they think it's doing. There's no real evidence of that at all. There might be a hormetic effect. Maybe you've heard of this word before. Hormesis is the idea. Every time I do this, throw myself out of the show. Anyways, hormesis is the idea that you eat something that's slightly poisonous to you, and your body has an adaptive response to it that's good. Okay? So perhaps there is a benefit to eating plant foods that have, let's say, high amounts of anti-nutrients like grains and legumes, because they do. They bind to minerals and other things. Carbohydrates in general can compete with vitamin C, and I'm pretty sure the GLUT4 receptor. So as that happens, it locks as a carbohydrate binds to it, it locks out the amount of vitamin C that can get in there, and therefore you have to have more vitamin C. We are finding this out pretty steadily on people who are eating carnivore style diets. So that they're not dying from scurvy. And in fact, there's ancient, I shouldn't say ancient, there's 100, 200-year-old evidence or more of people getting rid of scurvy by eating meat. It had to be fresh meat, though, generally speaking. But all this too, we eat less meat and more carbohydrates. We're raising our insulin levels. Your body actually has to go through a phase of fasting and depletion of insulin. It's part of all the cycles that you need to have in your body on a regular basis, and with your circadian rhythms and all that stuff in alignment. And when this happens, you go through phases of basically anabolic, meaning building, and catabolic, meaning stripping down. You go through phases of ketosis and phases of non-ketosis. Your body has the proper switches turned on and off at appropriate times. And if you're constantly elevating your insulin levels through sugary foods, especially if you're eating starchy carbohydrates and fat together, you're going to activate what's called the Randle cycle. I talked about it last week. I will get more into detail about the Randle cycle. And essentially, you're going to store a lot of fat because your body just can't have a ton of free fatty acids in the body or a ton of sugar in the bloodstream. It has to go somewhere. Your body can only store so much sugar in the form of glycogen in the muscles or in the liver. The rest of it has to be stored somewhere. What's it do? It converts it to fat. And then as your insulin levels are elevated, it's hard for your body to release the fat. So, I can't think of the enzyme off the top of my head. What it was, lipase is the enzyme that breaks the fat down, so it's available for you. And as it does that, you are then burning that for fuel, and eventually, if you have enough of them, you'll be releasing some ketones and whatever else. This all shuts down with carbohydrates, and the releasing of the fat. You go into nothing but sugar burning. So again, I've talked last week about certain gene polymorphisms, and we'll go into that again another time. Some people aren't good with super low carbohydrate diets. Some people aren't good with super high fat diets. You have to find your own balance based on your own genetics. But the other key thing that happens to folks with all this is they get diabetes in the brain. And this, friends, we call dementia. And people are younger and younger getting dementia, right? Alzheimer's and dementia are, for all intents and purposes, diabetes of the brain. These weren't diseases that affected people the way that they do today 100 years ago. They just weren't. And this is why we need to look at ancient people's diets and primitive people's diets, because we need to see that the heart disease, diabetes, the dramatic decline in age and all that stuff did not exist in the past. So here is another video real quick. This is from Ancestry Foundation, Omega-6 Apocalypse 2. So I haven't watched this, but I would assume he's going to talk about all the reason why those vegetable oils are bad for you. So again, we can go through this another time, but just for now, for your own study, for your own pursuits, go watch stuff like this, guys. It's all over the place. And yes, you will get a lot of nonsense. You absolutely will. But in general, if you take a big picture approach, which is what I try to do in about everything in my life, you're going to see that the data is pretty clear. These things weren't really in abundance in our diet before. It doesn't mean that they're bad because they are now, but it seems to affect us poorly. What was in our diet before? Well, let's look at some couple articles. These aren't end-all be-all articles either, folks. Just listing some dietary habits of certain people. So forgotten in time, the Native American diet and how it has returned to heal the first peoples. Now, if you didn't know, the first peoples, the natives of the U.S., no one's native to this continent apparently, but the first migrants here, they had a really hard time with a standard Western diet. And you know what? The same has happened all around the world to all indigenous peoples who lived on traditional diets. Things like alcohol and grains were not in their diet really before. As far as Indians go, if they did have grains, it was things like corn, which I'm actually one of those people. A lot of people tell you stay away from corn. I don't think corn's that bad for you. It's the highly processed corn that is. Popcorn specifically can be it's very low density, but it can be a very low as far as nutrients go, but it can be a very low calorie snack that's very filling because of the volume of it. So it all depends. It all depends, folks. And as far as other things like essential nutrients, and maybe let's say we talk about salt and potassium and the sodium ion pumps in your body and all that stuff. Again, another time. I'll probably do this until the end of the year. So on Tuesdays, if it's the case, if you guys enjoy it and it helps you out, and you can kind of start getting your diet squared away. This was never meant to be a diet channel, but I have this knowledge, so might as well bring it to you all. In any case, it says it's no secret that a rich, highly processed and refined foods of the Western diet are wreaking havoc on the general population. Obesity rates are growing, and nearly half of American adults are dealing with a diet-related chronic illness such as heart disease, high blood pressure, or type 2 diabetes. Nearly half. A diet loaded with saturated fats, good for you. So mind the BS here. Refined sugars, not good for you. Sodium, 100% you need sodium. Again, we'll get into that. You need salts. We'll get into that another time. This whole anti-sodium thing is just absurdity. It affects a very limited population. Salt made nations crumble in the past. It was very important. It was used in the Middle East as a fertilizer. It was used to preserve food, much like spices, to keep them from going rancid. Smoking, of course, was another technique, but salting your food and curing it, very important. And we know that ancient societies and civilizations had way more salt intake than we had. It's not the sodium, it's all of the other stuff combined with the sodium. It's basically because you have atherosclerosis after a lot of inflammatory things, and the sodium is bumping up your blood pressure at that point. But again, that's a whole nother topic I have to go into great detail about. The less than healthy substances have devastating effects on our bodies, but it wasn't always this way. Well, you can't get away from the saturated fat thing. I just showed you just study after study after study. I showed you like 5-6 studies there, and there are countless of them, folks. It's just a small sample of the fact that we were high tropic carnivores at one point. I do believe in adaptation. I do believe in epigenetic factors, that things can change within a few generations, but I don't think that we have changed that much as far as our ancient ancestors. It says our ancestors, including the Native Americans of the Western Hemisphere, relied on wild foods, domesticated crops, fresh game, and fiber-packed legumes and fruits for a truly diverse and utterly healthy diet. Well, the legumes and the domesticated crops in some tribes that were more civilized, others not so much. For communities living in the desert, these foods would have included chia, nopales, and the Chapadana Ranch favorite, mesquite. Many of these foods are high in vitamins and mineral content, making them wonderfully beneficial for people of those days. You know what I should have brought up? Let me see if I can do it now. Should have brought up the Seminole diet, because if you guys have ever been to the Everglades, you'll find real quick in the swamp there's not a lot of edible plant food. Can I Okay. Let's watch me not be able to spell correctly. Seminole traditional foods. I'll come back to that. But yeah, I wanted to have that up. Eating like our ancestors. Hunter-gatherer people were likely to be very healthy bunch, depending on all natural sources of food meant they had solid supply of nutrition. When the Native Americans began inhabiting the Americas, they found the land with abundant game like deer, buffalo, and sheep and goats. And again, one of the things I showed you from the tropic carnivore isotopes, right, is that these were Native Americans from the North Carolina area and Virginia. Wild sheep and goats, elk, caribou, bears, beavers, rabbits, squirrels, turtles, alligators, snakes, wild birds, insects, as well as fish and shellfish. This would have been the mainstay of their diet. The Indians, the natives of the Andes Mountains, would climb all the way from their homes, would go all the way down to the river basin to get eggs from salmon as they were spawning, right? Once they were laid before they spawned, for the pregnant women and children. We know now that is the early children, right? The young, very young children, and nursing mothers as well. We know now that omega-3 fatty acids, DHA, very specifically, is DHEA, that is important for development of the brain. We believe that meat, again, from an evolutionary perspective, is why we became so much smarter than other primates. Now, I think there's a huge leap there, but whatever. But those ancient people in the Andes knew they had to make this trek for the pregnant women, the nursing women, and the babies for their health and intelligence. How did they know this? I don't know. They figured it out a long time ago. Then there were domesticated crops and wild foods. While there were many nomadic tribes that thrived on hunting and gathering, many others became advanced farmers, developing special techniques like irrigation, tracing, and crop rotation to have enough food to survive through the winter. Farming in unison with gathering. From simple berry picking to more complicated processes like tapping trees for maple syrup, provided these indigenous people with a variety of healthy food sources. Important crops like wild foods included pumpkins, wild rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, eggs, honey, and a variety of nuts, cranberries, strawberries, wild plums, roots, greens, and a huge variety of other fruits and vegetables. Now, mind you, most fruits back in those days were dried. So here it talks about desert foods and whatever else. It's a rather big article. I got a lot of stuff to get to. Studies as far back as from the 1990s indicate that a change in the Indian diet back to the beans, corns, grains, greens, and other low-fat, high-fiber plant food that their ancestors depended upon can normalize blood sugar, suppress between meal hunger, and probably also foster weight loss. But again, it wasn't those things per se. It's not the carbs that you might have eaten in a traditional diet back in the day, per se. Let's see here about the Seminoles. See what this article has to say. Oh. Wow, guys, I guess you didn't know. Seminole Indians ate meat. Every facet of their life during this period for both the American soldier and the Seminole Indians was covered in detail as one walked around the fort, as well as the tribal settlement located across the pristine waters of the Hillsborough River via the wooden bridge. While all aspects of the living museum provided interest, it was particularly fascinating by the traditional foods of Native Americans living in Florida at the time, as demonstrated by a lady dressed in Seminole attire who thoroughly explained how the tribe nourished themselves on a daily basis. It says, the kids and chaperones had a fun time trying to guess what the animal was, but we all were wrong, even though the claws are a dead giveaway that the animal is a raccoon. Not boneless, skinless chicken breast, mind you, but the dark meat of a chicken, which is a mineral rich and full of various full of very nutritious fat. Yeah. Soaked corn, a staple of the Seminole tribe. Now, you'll find this a lot, is that there were certain preparations. They soaked grains and corn and all, if they ate them, or beans, all that kind of stuff. And often what you'll find is they use these things in soups as thickeners and whatever else. So this is how ancient, again, or primitive folks ate these things. The corn was poured into a coarse, cracked flour soaked in weak lye. Lye is also how they make olives edible, folks. If you didn't know, olives have to be processed to be edible. Lye water obtained from wood ash and then cooked over low to medium heat for 3 to 4 hours into a soup called sofki. Now, what did all this processing in the lye do? Well, it probably took out some of the anti-nutrients, some of the things that would compete for vitamins and minerals, and may just poison you, like oxalates. Oxalates are in leafy greens, particularly, and high amounts of oxalates will make you sick. So there you go. The lye increased in the nutrient availability of the corn, most notably vitamin B3 or niacin. That's an important thing. This is why pickling food, that is fermenting, not modern pickling, which is just adding vinegar, which does help preserve it, but not the same thing as fermenting food. Fermenting food also tends to have more nutrition. Cooking food like vegetables tends to make it more nutritious because certain nutrients are released. You degrade some nutrients, but others are released and become more bioavailable. It's an important thing that we'll talk about at another time, is bioavailability. Not all foods are bioavailable. Preparation is needed. Some people, well, one, you never have 100% absorption. Some people absorb better than others. Some preparation methods might be better for others. Pellagra, a vitamin B3 niacin deficiency disease, is a devastating illness that can result in death following progressively worsening symptoms of diarrhea, dermatitis, and dementia. Soaking the corn in lime water prior to cooking alleviates the risk of this illness. So you guys saw, I just pulled this up. I mean, I don't know what this article says, but I know how this stuff works because I've studied it for, I don't know, nearly 20 years now. 15 plus, whatever it's been. Sofki is sour to the taste and indicating that the corn was fermented as well as soaked. Further improved digestibility and nutrient absorption for Seminoles. The Seminole tribe in Florida was never completely defeated by the United States. No, they never surrendered. So that's kind of a weird article because it didn't talk a lot about the food. It just talked about two things, but that's okay. That's okay. They ate primarily meat. They lived off of alligators and, whatever was in the Everglades. So let's go here. This is more of a resource for you all. The Weston A. Price Foundation. Now, they're not perfect on everything, but most of their data is right. And I would show you a copy of Weston A. Price's book, but I have it out on loan right now. So there you go. But essentially, Weston Price went around and looked at the world and found out, hey, there are a lot of these diets that are out there, like the Good Scots diet right here. Weston Price studied these northern Scots living on islands that ate primarily nothing but seafood, and they lived in these thatch houses that had smoke burning in them all the time, and they would replace it like once a year or whatever. But apparently when you walked in the homes, there was all kinds of smoke, and these people had no issues with lung cancer or anything like that. Very good health. There are many accounts of people that he's visited that have had the same thing by eating a traditional style diet. I think we're far more robust as a species than we give ourselves credit to. It's just that we do a million and one things because civilization is wicked and evil that destroy our health. So here, this isn't so much a primitive society, but just a traditional Scottish. I'm an Appalachian. I am of Scottish descent. Part of my heritage is, at least, of my my mixed bag. So Yeah. Oats is chief cereal grain, root vegetables such as turnips and potatoes, leeks, cabbage, and kale, supplemented by wild vegetables such as nettles, um, sorrel, and garlic, butter, cheese, and other dairy products, fish, shellfish, and seaweed, some meat and game, and numerous varieties of wild berries in summer. The emphasis in this diet on fish livers and fish liver oils, shellfish organ meats, blood, and healthy fats like lard, and the resulting robust health of the traditional Scots helped dispel the modern myth that vitamin A is toxic and modern notion that we cannot obtain sufficient vitamin D from food. The Nords also, the Danes, and the Nords particularly dispel a lot of this. The emphasis in the diet on fish and liver. Hold on, sorry, I just read that. The mistress of the Scottish kitchen turned these honest, simple ingredients into a nourishing assortment of dishes, which are quite distinct from those represented by the bulk of other British Isle cuisines. The distinction in some parts recall the days of the Aldous Alliance, Scotland's political consolidation with France against the English from the 13th century until the end of the 16th century, which left a bright and lasting influence on Scottish cuisine, both in its style and its lexicon. The food's menus, history, and folklore of Scottish domestic culture are celebrated with a robust affection and pride that are delightfully infectious. And Florence Millon's, Marion McNeil's The Scots Kitchen, yada yada yada. So it's a cookbook from 1929. Old cookbooks, folks, will teach you a lot. There's a guy I like on YouTube. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, who does like 18th century cooking, or even earlier, like 17th century cooking in the Americas. It's really interesting. So it goes on. Again, this is just one article, but let's get back to the more ancient diet stuff. So one, I just wanted to bring this up. Stefansson's an interesting character to read about because he spent time with the Inuits. This is in 1906. He went to the Arctic for the food, taste, beliefs of the average American. By 1918, after 11 years living as an Eskimo, among the Eskimos, I had learned things which caused me to shed most of those beliefs. 10 years later, I began to realize what I learned was going to influence distinctively. So Stefansson went up there and got stuck there and started eating as the Inuit did, and he ate a high-fat diet. And he realized that after he got over the keto flu, because he wasn't getting enough minerals, most likely, or salts, then he felt fine. He got adapted. And when that adaptation took place, he realized that he had better endurance. It was short-term endurance, things like lifting very, very heavy weights, which I think you can adapt to, honestly. But this is because of glycogen and glycolysis. So one of the ways, getting into exercise science, one of the things that you can do to help with that over time and to get stronger is do aglycolytic training, meaning not allow that to be a factor. But that's something else I'll talk about some other time, maybe. I don't know. In any case, this guy basically came to America and tried to sell an all-meat diet to people, and just didn't work out for him. And people will say that he, obviously you can't do this because, people can't do this. It can't happen because we have these presuppositions. And so in his 70s, he died of, I think, colon cancer. And people will tell you, well, he probably should have had some fruits and vegetables. But the Inuit, they don't really have that. Right here from, this is just a quick wiki. Traditionally Inuit cuisine, which includes Greenland cuisine and Yup'ik cuisine. Yup'ik cuisine. I don't know. Holly, am I saying that right? I don't know if I'm saying that right. Consisted of a diet of animal sources that were fished, hunted, and gathered locally. In the 20th century, the Inuit diet began to change. And by the 21st century, the diet was closer to the Western diet. And they're quite obese now because of that. You can see in this picture here, they do have a good bit of clothes on, but you can see a lot of Inuits today are quite obese because they eat a Western style diet. So what were the food sources? Sea mammals such as walrus, seals, and whales. Whale meat generally comes from the narwhal and the beluga whale and the bowhead whale. The latter is able to feed an entire community for nearly a year from its meat, blubber, and skin. Blubber's huge. 80% of their dietary calories comes from blubber, folks. Inuit hunters most often hunt juvenile. Let's get this little bigly. Whales, which compared to adults are safer to hunt and have tastier skin. Ring seal and bearded seal are the most important aspect of an Inuit diet and is most often the largest part of their diet. Land mammals such as caribou, polar bear, and muskox. Birds and their eggs. Saltwater and freshwater fish, including scalping, Arctic cod, Arctic char, capelin, and lake trout. While it is not possible to cultivate native plants for food in the Arctic, it literally is not. You can't farm there. It's too cold the majority of the year. There's not enough sunlight, yada, 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 right? Inuit have traditionally gathered those that are naturally available, including berries. Again, you're going to find this a lot. Berries are a mainstay of the human diet all across the world. Crowberry and cloudberry, hibiscus plants, which has a nice taste to it. I like in my tea sometimes, as grasses and fireweed. Tubers and stems, including mouse food. People consist of roots of various tundra plants, which are catched by voles and burrows. Oh, so they take it straight from mouse burrows. That's interesting. Roots and various tundra plants, which are catched by voles. Yeah. And tuberous spring beauties. So, again, it's just a wiki. It's the basics, but you can go through all of this. This is, guys, they eat mostly animal. They don't really live on anything else. Because the climate of the Arctic is ill-suited for agriculture and lacks forageable plant matter, for much of the year, the traditional Inuit diet is lower in carbohydrates. And higher in fats and animal protein compared to the global average. Hold on. Well, I get a baby, folks. So, and then it goes in here. When carbohydrate intake is adequate for total energy expenditure, protein is broken down in the liver, or when it's not adequate, I guess, is inadequate. Yes. It's broken down in the liver through gluconeogenesis and utilizes as an energy source. Inuits studied in 1970s were found to have abnormally large livers, presumably to assist in this process. Their urine volumes were also high. They actually thought that these people might be somewhat diabetic, but they're not because of their micturition, that is urination. As a result of additional urea, which the body uses to purge waste products from gluconeogenesis. However, in multiple studies, the traditional Inuit diet has not been shown to be ketogenic. And this is a adaptation within their group. So let me turn this off dark mode for a minute because I want to read comments here. I know everyone's got to chime in when the baby comes. Shelley says, "Oh, she's so cute." Let's see here. Olives are the best fruits. Fight me. I used to hate olives. Like literally. Every time I do that, every time. Anyways, did not like olives. Forced myself to like them over time, and now I like them a lot, but not as much as my wife. She absolutely loves olives. I've heard the view that we slowly kill ourselves each time we eat. Your view on intermittent fasting. I have been doing intermittent fasting for at least 15 years. I believe that everyone should do at least a 12-hour daily fast. Nice. And then my baby just spit up on stream. So everybody should do a 12-hour daily fast at least, at minimum. That's been shown through Dr. Sechin Panda's time-restricted feeding research and elsewhere. There's a lot of data on intermittent fasting. We know, and I will do a whole episode on this in the future. We know that life expectancy increases as insulin decreases, folks. We know that caloric restriction extends longevity because animals that have high levels of insulin have shorter lifespans. Period. So that's where we need to go, one way or another. That's how we need to go with things. And that happens, by the way, when you fast, you lower your insulin, you exercise, you get good sleep. Sleep's a big one that will mess you up. Diet is not the only factor here, but it is the major factor. When you exercise intensely, you increase your insulin sensitivity. When you restrict your carbohydrates, you increase your insulin sensitivity. And also, if you're a male and you eat a lot of small meals during the day, you're decreasing your testosterone and your fat burning ability through your growth hormone release and epinephrine, norepinephrine. So, because you blunt all those responses when you eat. Doesn't mean we don't have to eat. Of course we have to eat. It's just that we don't need to be filling our faces all the time full of food. So before we keep going on, I'm going to play this video just so I can clean up my daughter real quick. And it's the video we had been watching, and then we'll get back into traditional foods here.
Causes cancer. Well, I had the good fortune of interviewing Dr. David Klurfeld. I got special permission to interview him. He was on the WHO working group that decided meat caused cancer in 2015. This is the famous thing everyone quotes. Well, I'd had one of the only interviews with him. And he told me, you can listen to it, Peak Human Podcast, said they were a bunch of vegans and vegetarians with an agenda. That he brought studies to the table and they did not look at them. They threw them out, ignored them. He was showing good evidence that meat does not cause cancer, and they threw them out. And so this is what they did. They were working with 744 studies. They actually only used 29 and 27 to do their final, conclusion, and it was almost a wash. If you look at it, 15 red meat is good, 14 red meat is bad. It wasn't that far off. And so when we look at this, the meat and cancer, the risk factor is only 0.18%. So that's very small. And just to put that in perspective, when we found out that cigarettes had a strong link to cancer, that risk factor was about 10 to 30%. So now we know that something's there, and we did a lot more research, and we found that was true. So just know that this meat and cancer, this small 0.18%, that 0.18% could be noise, right? That's not even enough to be significantly, statistically significant. And so, there's all these other things that
Sorry, guys, didn't mean to interrupt that.
More red meat tend to eat more fast food and exercise less and smoke more.
I think he shows here that red meat consumption's gone down as well, although meat consumption has not. The chicken industry and all the diet gurus from all the way back in the 80s and 70s and whatever have basically convinced people to eat a lot more chicken. I can tell you right now that most industrialized raised chicken are absolutely disgusting and filthy animals, and you probably should not be eating them. Not to mention the farming practices are just horrid toward those animals. I will side on the vegans of certain things like that there are dietary things that we shouldn't be treating animals cruelly, even if we're going to eat them, folks. They should be well taken care of. It's just not moral to be cruel to animals like that. Any sentient being of any sort, we shouldn't be doing that.
And all this type of thing. So I know a lot of great doctors that would say that it's a healthy user bias that's the problem, not the red meat. It's what other things people are doing who eat red meat. And we have some great data showing people eating high-fat diets that include a lot of meat, going against the guidelines, are reversing type 2 diabetes.
My father did this. And as far as the biases he's talking about, 90% plus of all dietary advice given are based on epidemiological studies. but they're not even epidemiological studies because epidemiology does not operate the way it does in diet. So dietary epidemiological studies are notoriously flawed because they're used, they're done by mass food surveys where people don't know what they eat. Now, if you've ever trained anybody, which I have for years, I mean, I've been training people since I was 16. So if you've ever trained anybody, you will know that they have no clue what they're doing most of the time. You just rare that you have someone who's really squared away, who knows what they ate, every day of the week, all the time, whatever. Someone like me, because generally I don't have a lot of variety in my diet. I have some, but not a ton. But you ask them and they don't think that they've eaten anything when they've eaten everything. So food surveys are just not reliable, guys, in any way, shape, or form. And most of them are like, they'll ask people, how much meat do you think you ate, in the last 30 days? Well, I myself eat something like 1.5 pounds a day or more. So, but I know that I measure my food to get some estimate or idea, like to know around where I'm at. Old Sam Nope gave a donation here over in the entropy. Well, then there's a chance it's all the ice creams that have left Joe how he is. Yes, the dementia thing. Quite possibly. How much longer is in this? I'll play a few more minutes and we'll go on to where I was at.
94% of patients eliminated or reduced insulin usage in this study. You can see a whole bunch of weight loss as a result. Their A1C went down, got off a lot of meds. This is stuff that you'll never see in mainstream media. Here's another study showing the diet with the more fat, the more meat, and less carbs. All the health markers improved, except for LDL, which we can talk about. But you can see the weight went down. These pink bars, the greatest weight loss, greatest HbA1c, the lowest glucose. Everything's good. Very low triglycerides. You see a great improvement in the triglycerides. And then that one that goes up, HDL, that's a good thing if your HDL goes up. The only thing is, LDL went up a little bit. But a lot of people would disagree with the fact that that means that much.
Yeah, it means jack all, literally.
Here's another one. Dr. Zoe Harcombe put together some data showing that the death rate per 100,000 people in Europe went down as they ate more saturated fat. So this is exactly opposite. This big scam started with blaming saturated fat and cholesterol for heart disease, which we go through in depth in the film, so we can't get into all that now. But I'd like.
So, and yeah, the big scam comes all the way back in the day. Not him solely alone, but Ansel Keys was a big one. So he's the one who created the heart hypothesis. People countered this back in the day, but no one wanted to listen because, well, they knew better in the science. And we're talking about this in the era of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where everyone was convinced of the world of tomorrow was coming and all this stuff. The boomers, right, and the silent generation before them thought we were going to live in this utopian socialistic world. I mean, they're still trying to push that a law, but a lot of other people are not about that these days. So, certain things don't work when I change to dark mode too here on the old StreamYards, but that's all right. So here's an article again about Inuit diets: seal soup for dinner. Get to know the Greenland Inuit cuisine. It says whale meat, seal soup, or lumpfin, or lumpfish. And basically, he describes the diet. And so the little bit of tubers and stuff they do use, they put in this soup. That's their big delicacy. See, that's a lot of meat. And in any case, for the sake of time, again, a lot of meat. For the sake of time, you guys can read this on your own. It's a good old fish head. That has a lot of nutrients in it. Them eyeballs, lots of vitamin C, guys. Eat it up. Yummy, yummy. All right. Health secrets of the Plains Indians. We talked about Indians already. Let's go to the Nords. So this was a thing a few years back where, if you all know the Mediterranean diet, by the way, the Mediterranean diet is not what they say it is. A real Mediterranean diet is high in animal fats and animal products, very low in pasta, a lot of antipasta. The actual people in the Mediterranean, just like anywhere else, eat starchy food as a side food because they cannot get more animal products. The end. And they have a ton of processed meat. This whole notion that the Mediterranean diet's low in saturated fat is nonsense. For decades, they used to call the French paradox because they eat a high amount of fat and they smoke and they drink a lot of wine. It must be the wine that protects them. They have no heart disease. No, you're just idiots and you're starting from the wrong premise. In fact, don't start with a premise. Start with the premise that you want to find the truth, and you will, I promise you. So this gets into it, and it kind of talks about like, how your grandmother would eat, yada, yada, yada. Right here. Sounds pretty good, right? I like to think the Nordic diet is similar to the Mediterranean diet, just colder. Tomatoes and cancer-fighting lipocene. There's no evidence that works in your body that way. Those are like in vitro studies and stuff. It doesn't work. Are switched out of cabbages and strawberries with their own cancer-fighting acethions. What is it? Whatever that is. Meals of oily fish are swapped for, meals with oily fish. Yeah, because the Nords eat a lot of oily, fatty fish. The Nordic diet does one better on the Mediterranean diet. Is in its explicit focus on seasonality and local ingredients. Yeah, well, these things could be good. For breakfast, you might have oatmeal porridge and berries and apples, or kefir. If you guys pronounce that kefir, you're pronouncing it wrong. It's kefir. That is a fermented milk drink. It's kind of like yogurt, but not quite that thick. With berries or rye crisp with cold smoked salmon and scrambled eggs and cucumber. And what you'll actually find is, the topping like shrimp, mayonnaise, lettuce, tomato, liver pate, and pickled beets, a couple slices of hard yellow cheese with slices of pepper. I can tell you right now that all the density of the calories there, herring and pickles, shrimp, mayo. The mayo is generally not made with animal fat because it's not. Animal fats are generally more saturated and therefore they'll be in a solid form. So you need to have some viscosity, right? But they are made with eggs. Liver pate, highly nutrient dense. In fact, if you guys want to get some liver in your diet, an easy way to do it, other than being like me and ordering cod liver off the internet, is get bratwurst from your supermarket. But if you want to get a better quality, maybe go to Aldi or like Lidl or something like that. Maybe Trader Joe's has something like that. I don't know. But bratwurst is liver pate. It has all the B vitamins from liver. It has a very few other additives in it, and it tastes good. I can tell you right now, it's like bologna or something. It's really tasty. Traditionally, you eat it on a little bit of rye bread, maybe a little bit of mustard and some onions, maybe a few capers. And you get that extra superfood. So here we have another one real quick. Science Daily. Nomadic peoples, good health baffles scientists. The human body is a true miracle. Naja Knoll recently found new proof that the statement in the nomadic Maasai people of Kenya and Eastern Africa, the German nutritionists analyzed the diet of the nomadic tribe and the Kajiado district. I don't know. The surprising results of this field of study shown that the Maasai are in good health status in spite of a limited diet. Well, of course they are. Weston Price studied the Maasai. He was a dentist. He found that they had no tooth decay, no heart disease. We know that tooth decay and heart disease are linked in dentistry, which is why they try and tell you to go to the dentist at least once a year. It's not because tooth decay causes heart disease, folks. It's because the stuff that's causing your heart disease is also decaying your teeth. It's the sugars. It's the breakdown. I literally did not go. I got out of the Marine Corps. I didn't go to the dentist for like 10 years. I kid you not. And I started to have some bleeding or whatever. I had a buddy of mine as a dentist. And they had to clean my teeth of a lot of plaque. No cavities. 0 cavities. They said that your teeth are highly mineralized. I wonder why. That was some years ago. I'm just saying. I don't find a need to go to the dentist often, folks, myself. You guys get your annual cleaning, whatever. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying. The human body is a true miracle. Naja Noel recently found new proof that the statements in the nomadic Maasai people of North Africa, yada, yada, yada. Excuse me there. Blood tests show that there is a high content of healthy omega-3 fatty acids in their erythrocyte membranes, the cell walls of the red blood cells, even though these acids are not ingested. Well, they are ingested. That's not true. You have omega-3 fatty acids in cattle and bovine meat, and they're fat. It's just less so when they're grain-fed or grain-finished, which majority are grain-finished. Most cows are actually grain-fed, folks. Or sorry, grass-fed and finished on grain the last portion of their life. Yeah, another finding was the outcome of the fieldwork in Africa. Studies show that the traditional story patterns about the Maasai diet are wrong. Travelers in Africa like Gustav Adolf Fischer, and this is in the 1800s, and English Joseph Thomas spread the image of a bloodthirsty Maasai. According to their reports, the herdsmen consume mainly meat, milk, and blood, a particularly high percentage of fermented milk, a kind of yogurt. By the way, in India, they just leave milk out. Natural milk just ferments. It doesn't go bad. Now, it might not taste right, but it doesn't go bad. We have stupid laws here in the United States about pasteurization because we industrialize everything, which makes it more susceptible to exposure. You know, you get salmonella because of runoff from cattle, but you don't get salmonella from the cattle. It's from the plant food that you eat because of the industrial exposure. Was said to be part of their diet. Naja Noel's findings paint a very different picture. The scientist of the Jena University discovered that the Maasai have strongly sweetened milk tea for breakfast. Some Maasai eat a kind of porridge in the morning, a liquid mixture of cornmeal, water, and milk and sugar. Okay. Today, in modern times, all these people in the 1800s, they were wrong. No. For lunch, there will be milk and ugali, a kind of polenta being made from cornmeal and water. Dinner is similar to lunch, says Noel, who points out that she did her field study at the end of the dry season. Well, I can tell you right now, they didn't have cornmeal before the 1800s in Africa. Corn is a product of the New World. The word for corn in English existed, but it meant any grain. Maize, which is what we're talking about, didn't exist prior to probably the 1700s in Africa, right? Because the New World had to be found first. There may be slightly different results in the remarkably short rainy seasons because of the Maasai livestock produce much more milk. This milk will then ferment and calabashes, and the outcome of the fermenting process will be a yogurt-like drink that might have a very probiotic benefit. So they just make kefir. It is clear, though, that the meat featured only rarely in the Maasai menu, and the main part, more than 50%, consists of vegetarian foods. The preferred meat is that of sheep, goats, whereas the meat of traditional zebu cattle is only rarely eaten. A cow will only be slaughtered for rival festivals by the Maasai. Yes, but that's because it provides the milk. It's the same thing as kind of in part why I mentioned in India, because they don't generally eat cattle either. They find it as sacred, and it provides milk instead, so they don't eat it. They do eat red meat through goats, though. So let's see. I got cookies on here. What? No way. So not a lot there. She's just saying, oh, they eat a lot of sugary and stuff. Well, how much though? She didn't give any caloric breakdown. The Maasai diet, keep healthy despite the high-fat diet. It's from 2012. The Maasai are very special people who live primarily from farming and livestock activities in Kenya and Tanzania. They have mystified researchers for years. Remember, the French paradox. There is no paradox, folks. You're coming from the wrong position in the first place. You have presuppositions that are not scientifically founded, period. To a large extent, the Maasai live on milk from their cattle, which means their diet is as full of fat as a diet of people living in the West. Unlike Westerners, however, the Maasai do not have many problems related to lifestyle disease. That's because it isn't the fat in our diet, it's the starchy carbohydrates, the sugars, and the oils from plants that we never would have gotten in mass amounts before. Health researchers around the world have therefore been greatly interested in these East Africans since cardiovascular and other lifestyle diseases started to become a great problem in the West in the 60s and 70s, right when the government started saying, stop eating fat. The McGovern Commission came out in the 1970s, folks. We'll go through that at some point in the future here. To date, scientists have only studied the Maasai physical activities using questionnaires. Well, that's dumb. It's not scientific. But now Danish researchers are the first to have taken objective measurements of the levels of physical activity of the Maasai. The Maasai don't run much, okay? The Maasai move much more than we do. It says they asked 370 Maasai to carry a little sensor that measured the pulse and the body movements of the wearer. They probably just don't sit still like we do, because what we do is we in comatose states. Fat Maasai are also healthy. The result is interesting, and constant walking activity of the Maasai can contribute to their health condition despite their high-fat diet. Yeah, again, just retardedness. There's no data anywhere that says a high-fat diet is bad for you. We know specifically too many polyunsaturated fats is not good for you. We know that sugar is not good for you, because both of these things cause inflammation. 8.7% of the study's Maasai's over the age of 18-year-olds had high blood pressure, probably from the sugar and cornmeal that they're now eating that was never in their diet for, I don't know, the entire existence of their being. Africans are generally predisposed to high blood pressure, and town or city dwellers are most affected because, again, they eat more of a Western-style diet, with as many as 20% of them having high blood pressure, according to Christensen. High cholesterol values were found in 3% of the studies. Doesn't matter. Low cholesterol is a risk for mortality, not high cholesterol. I'm not going to get into this now. It's just not. You have higher mortality rates when you have a lower cholesterol, folks. I think under 120 or something like that. And we're not even studying actual cholesterol. We're looking at LDL and HDL, which are lipoprotein carriers. There is no free fatty acid in your system. Everything has to be, or cholesterol in your system. Everything is carried along by lipoprotein, generally. A study of overwhelming Maasai with a BMI over 25 showed that they had a normal, healthy level of insulin. Few overweight Maasai showed signs of having moved to pre-diabetic stages. And it talks about some other things, but I want to get out of here very soon. So I'm just going to run through a few things real quick. First off, guys, you may have or may have not have heard of these folks. The Anderson family. This article is a little old, 2015. Sean Baker brought this up when he was on Joe Rogan. They have been on a carnivore diet. This says for 17 years. Now it's going to be 20 plus, given that it's 2021. And they basically live off of ribeye. This one doesn't have a picture, but this one does. This was just published last year. Joe and Charlene Anderson, more than 20 years eating only meat. This was Charlene at 25 years old, and there she is at 45 years old. And there's old Joe, 57, 44. Does that mean that you need to eat nothing but ribeyes? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are plenty of examples of this being the case. These folks aren't sick. And this lady looks better, younger, or she's got 3 kids too, by the way. She looks better older, than she was when she was younger. Let's see, what else do we have? Meat, milk, meat, and blood. How diet derives natural selection in the Maasai. So that's from Wired. I'm not going to get into it today, guys. Introduction into Mongolian foods, from yaks to yurts. And again, this is what you have to look at. We can go down through here. The primary thing that the Mongolians eat are horse and yak, and they do a lot of falconry. So they get meat that way from small game animals, right? Right here, some of their diet has been influenced by China, of course, and other things. But generally, there are still people that live on the steppes and still live primitive lifestyles. The 5 snouts of the Mongolian culture are basis for not only the cuisine of the country, but also its agriculture and traditional nomadic way of life. The most revered of these 5 creatures are horse, learning to ride it as a fundamental to learning to walk. In many nomadic communities, the veneration of the horse is also combined with a reverence for Genghis Khan, whose Mongolian empire was fueled by the skill of the Mongolian horsemanship. Mongolian diet and horse meat is available in most restaurants throughout the country. The other 5 snouts are sheep and goat, who form the basis of much Mongolian cuisine, and camels and yaks, both of which are regularly used in Mongolian cooking. Yak's milk is a particularly common part of the Mongolian diet, and yak cheese is also used as the basis for soups and curds. Now, you might see there a piece of bread. That is a piece of bread. You know what they do? They make dumplings. So they talk about Mongolian barbecue, and there's the little dumplings. The booze. These are really common, but what you'll find is that there's not a lot of carbohydrates in them, and they are stuffed with meat. Here's the African Aboriginals. Same thing that happens to all these other traditional people happened to them. They start getting westernized food. They've gotten very, very sick. A classical Aboriginal diet did have some starchy tubers and some wild plants in it, but it was primarily meat. And again, you can find these things all over the internet. I don't have time to finish them because I need to finish up here. Cardiovascular disease risk factors in Australian Aborigines. Aborigines from all over Australia develop unusually high prevalence rates for obesity, non-insulin dependent diabetes, mellitus, and cardiovascular disease when they make the transition from their traditional hunter-gatherer lifestyle to a westernized lifestyle. There is no evidence that they experience these diseases as hunter-gatherers. Amazing. Data from the New Extent Traditional Oriented Group. By the way, vegans will try and tell you that and we just don't know completely, but they will try and tell you that the Aboriginals ate a ton of plant food. They ate far more animal food than they did plants. There's just overwhelming evidence everywhere, unless they couldn't get the animal foods. However, in view of other extreme leanness and the regular physical activity, fasting insulin and triglyceride levels were inappropriately elevated, suggestive of insulin resistance. When westernized diabetic Aboriginals reverted temporarily to the traditional hunter-gatherer diet and lifestyle, all of the metabolic abnormalities of diabetes were greatly ameliorated. Fasting glucose and triglyceride levels fell markedly, and glucose tolerance and insulin secretion improved. Oh, yeah? You got a wet diaper? No. In addition, they lost weight, and there was a reduction in major risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So they go back to their diet and all that. But then right here, the hunter-gatherer diet was associated with increased physical activity, low fat. Not true. Not true. In their case, it actually was potentially more low fat. But again, we'll talk about the Randall cycle in the future. You can do well with low fat and high carbohydrate. It's the combination of the two together that creates the problem. high fiber diet and low energy density and high nutrient density derived from very lean meat and uncultivated vegetables. And supposedly most of the meat out there is quite lean, from what I understand. Meat nutritional density, don't have time to cover this. Glycine, very important, guys. Glycine. In fact, you need glycine if you're eating too many lean meats, too many skeletal muscle, too much skeletal muscle instead of eating, organ meats and stuff like that. You're going to get too many methyl groups, and that's not a good thing. I'll get into another time. So I guess that's going to be it for today. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Thane Michael says, cutting sugar, lowering carbs, eating more fats and meats, and fasting has improved my health significantly. I was overweight my whole life and don't feel hungry all the time. Well, there you go, buddy. All right. Give me a second, guys. You be all right here? How about there? Oh, she's about to wail on me. So let me see if I can read some chats real quick. Shelly says, one of the facilities I work with goes to Italy quite a bit. He says they eat a lot of pasta, but walk everywhere. They're thin, and probably because of this. Italy, it depends on what region you're in. The pasta they eat, though, is still, it's not like here in the U.S. All right, I got to get her. Way to run a live stream. It depends. It really depends. They eat a lot of empty pasta. That is what they eat a lot of, for certain. There's just a ton of pork, especially, that they eat in their diet, and cured meats and stuff like that. Same with Spain. Go to like a tapas restaurant, see what's on the menu. And I mean, something that's sort of authentic, right? You're going to find that, yeah, there are veggies and stuff. It's not a bunch of crappy, starchy food. Cheap food is always carbs. So let's see. I don't got anything else over on Entropy, which is where most of you guys are at right now. So that's cool. That looks like that's about it as far as I can see. Well, guys, I did my best in 2 hours to give you some background, some information, some things for you to look at for yourself. Obviously, I cannot cover every single little thing. But this is, again, me searching for the truth for years, trying to optimize my health and my diet, as well as to help other people when I can. So in any case, guys, I'm going to have to get out of here. My daughter is about to wail, but I appreciate y'all being here so much. And remember, this has been All Minus One. And I'm Bill. If you guys couldn't figure that out by that name down there, where's that? And I wish you all well.